Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening.
Doctor, let me start off by asking you, neoliberalism in Sri Lanka, you are a strong advocate, one of the leading strong advocates against this policy. Why?
Thank you for asking this question. Actually, probably the entire country, should go into a deeper discussion on the topic that you are raising here tonight, right? Neoliberal economic policies actually were introduced in late 70s to the world. That was the time when Margaret Thatcher in Great Britain and Ronald Reagan in United States of America, were supporting these policies actually to give a boost or give new potentials to the capitalism of the day, right? Sri Lanka was one of the countries in the world which embraced these policies at the very beginning. Now, what were the very significant features of this neoliberal economic system? Actually, it is the contemporary capitalism. It's contemporary capitalism. We call it neoliberalism. There are some features, and it is actually, the one of them is that market economy, and you open the markets, right? So there is a free flow of things. You can import anything and you can export anything, right? But the intention of introducing this kind of policy, as it was stated by Ronnie DeMille that time, for our country to become or to go to an export economy, right? Now looking back, and after, shall we say, after 43 years since 78, we have passed 43 years. See what has happened. Actually, we are importing 2 times what we export. So that is what has happened. And then they liberalized everything, right? And they various tax relief tax cuts were introduced, so that actually only they kept only income tax, but that also at a very low level, and whatever the income tax they collected were indirect taxes, taxes collected from the entire population instead of the very rich. So much so, about 90%, 85 to 90% of tax is being paid by the general population, whereas the super rich pay only about 10 to 15%, right? So tax revenues actually came down, and then of course the privatization came hand in hand with these policies. So we kept on privatizing all our government-owned enterprises. There are a lot, more than hundreds of government-owned enterprises were privatized. So what happened at the end of the day was that the state income came down drastically. It came down, right? If in 1978 the share of state income was about 24% of the GDP, that time gross domestic production. Now it has come less than, probably around 5%, 6% to this kind of level. So you have lost the income, state income, right? The income to the state coffers, it was coming down. But the paradox here is that the economy during this time doubled. Now shall we say from 2010 to about 2015 or whatever, the GDP doubled from, shall we say, from $42 billion to around $84 billion. And if you go by so-called per capita income, that has doubled from $2,000 per capita to $4,000. But okay, now your income has been doubled, your per capita income has been doubled, but your income to state has come down. How do you understand that? That you gave all these facilities, all the tax cuts, all the liberalization things, right? All those things were given, in expectation of, more investments from this super rich class, because they were given so much of tax cuts, and the proponents or the people who proposed these policies, they said, okay, when they earn more and more money, they will invest them. They will invest them, right? But have we seen the investments going up in this country? No. And what about savings? Have they saved them in the country? No, you can't see that also. Around 20%, 22% savings. It's not going up anywhere, right? So what happened to economy, right? You see that you have given all these facilities to certain class, and you see that what happened was that the imports have been doubled, right? And it looks like there is a class of financial capitalists, who have earned a lot of money during this period. So, and so you lost the income, then there was no way that you could run the country. There was no way that you could go for your various developmental work. So invariably, or rather governments, consecutive governments, they were compelled to get loans, more and more loans, so that if it was around 740 million US dollars in 1978, the total amount of loans that we had, now it has come up to, it was gone up to a very big numbers, but now it's around 45 billion US dollars. You see, 45 billion US dollars from 740 million US dollars. The irony is that you can't pay your debt now. To pay your debt, you are looking for more borrowings. So this is why we call that we are in a debt trap now. We are in a trap. So this is what happened to this country after 43 years of neoliberal economic policies.
But Dr. Some might argue that this policy would open the door for more opportunities, more job opportunities. But at the same time, as you mentioned, it has given a certain aspect of, I would say, or we can term it as abuse of the policy, if that is correct to say.
Yeah, you see, what has happened in this country was that, actually, really speaking, we have destroyed our, our kind of our, export economy, the production, that we increasingly country became dependent on things that we import from abroad, right? Starting from food to everything else, everything else. If you go into history, right, you will see in 1970s, towards the end of 1970s, actually 76, 75, 76, 77, 78 even, that time, right, you had a very, lot of industries in this country. We produced many things. You had a very good textile industry, and you had other industry you produced, and if you analyze the share of the shares of the economy, right, you will see industry was occupying a bigger percentage of the GDP, right? The service sector was not that high at that time, but now if you look at it, is service sector is the leading the economy. Not industrial or agricultural productions. So this is what has happened, right? This is what has happened. Why it has happened so? That I think we need to look into, right? We need to look into. Now I can bring you another example for that. I mean, as I agree that there had been some employments created. I mean, these things do happen, right? But you have to see the overall outcome. Overall, what has happened? The situation that we are in, right, is a crisis situation, actually was brought by the neoliberal economic policies, right? Now I give you another example, right? From there, even if you want, you can go to other areas as well, right? Now see, Sri Lanka produce enough paddy for this country. But look at the price of rice, why it is going up so high. Is there a reason for that? Yes, because this rice market or paddy market is being controlled by few individuals. They are controlling everything, right? Why it has happened so? Because we lost the government share in the market which we had before starting these economic policies. You know, Sri Lanka had a government sector, right, in this market. There was a paddy marketing board, there was a mechanism to buy paddy from farmers, right, and to, you know, produce rice out of this paddy. And you see that, so the government had a hand in the market. Now, you know, this is why you see that, I mean, this happened as a result of the neoliberal economic policy. We lost because, you know, our, you know, we wholly and fully depend on the private sector. That is the stated policy stance of the you know, neoliberal, you know, economic pundits, right? They wanted to do the things this way. But even today, what I am telling here is that we can't bring down the rise, the price of the rice without having a government share, right? State sector share in the market, at least 25 to 30%. Then we can control the price.
It's quite astounding, Dr. Weerasinghe. Like, if you look at history, Sri Lanka used to be called as the granary of the Eastern world, or in Sinhala you say Peradigaloke Dhanyagare. But now, as you mentioned, we are importing everything, from rice to dal to sugar to everything. And at the same time, we see farmers, our local farmers, who shed their blood, sweat and tears to, you know, feed the country, are in a dire situation where they don't have fertilizer, they don't have the adequate weedicides, pesticides, and so on. And some are even abandoning their paddy fields. And even recently, we came across a few individuals where they have decided to sell off their paddy lands and get into, you know, the construction sector as mason bosses or assistants, or, you know, that kind of field. What is going wrong? Now, you mentioned that the government needs to have a strong share in the paddy market, but the government has not been able to do that. I mean, successive governments have not been able to do that. Does that mean governments are weak in Sri Lanka?
Not really. They intentionally destroyed the government sector. You know, it was a result of the intentional policies. They, you know, the successive governments, you know, when I say successive governments, all inclusive. You see that you had different kind of governments, no? People who wear these guys sataka and sarongs and saris and everybody, right? All of them followed the same policies, you know.
But as a communist party in Sri Lanka, don't you believe that, you know, the Sri Lankan government should muscle its way into this market, rather than allowing, you know, like you said, individuals to control it?
Is, you know, this is what we are, you know, we are agitating for, we are advocating for, right? You know, we are not asking, you see, we are not proposing to close the markets, but okay, let the market be there, but then let the government also, state sector also has a share in it, right? So that you know, that then you can control certain things, right? Bring the planning, you know, which was abandoned and which was abolished as you were introducing the neoliberal economic policies to this country. You know, we had a Ministry of Planning in 1970s, but it was abandoned, right? So you need to bring planning to this country. You need to you know, your government needs to play a role in the market, right? And you are talking about farmers, actually, you know. I mean, I was in 2 districts last week. That was in Ampara and Monaragala, and I met about hundreds of farmers actually during 3 days of my tour to these 2 districts. I fully agree with what you said. You see, it's a dire situation. I mean, dire situation for farmers. We are going to have a dire situation for the entire population. You see that it looks like that you are going to lose probably around 30, 40, 50% of the harvest. This is what people say. And what we saw in our eyes were that, you know, very undernourished paddy fields. right? The paddy, you will see, they are very undernourished. You see, I mean, you can see in your naked eyes what has happened. And then the farmers told us, you see, so they don't have fertilizers, right? And the certain other kinds of organic and other kind of fertilizers have been distributed, but you can't use them due to various reasons. Some kind of fertilizers you can't use. The moment that you put them to paddy fields, the dogs are coming and start eating with the paddy themselves, right? And they are so smelly, and this kind of things. And then on the other hand, you see that now they have allowed some kind of fertilizers to come in, but then they are the prices are so exorbitant, so high, about around 30,000 rupees. Kalmune, we were told that around 30,000 rupees worth the amount of fertilizer that they used to buy for very low prices.
Doctor, we'll discuss this fertilizer issue and the issue surrounding the Sri Lankan farmers, and also a key point about the Communist Party, where they have taken a stance from within the government against a very interesting topic. All of this right after the break.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Welcome back to Newsline. It's me, Zulfik Farzan, with Dr. G. Weerasinghe, and we were discussing the plight of Sri Lankan farmers. And Doctor, let's make this a bit quick, because I have an important point I want to get to about the Communist Party in Sri Lanka. Now, we were discussing about the farmers. Is Sri Lanka going to face a shortage of food? Because by the looks of it, farmers are saying that they can't produce a good harvest.
I think now the experts say that, the farmers say that who are in the fields, right? So you have to go by what they say. I mean, you have to accept it. And why it has happened so? Because that there was one day when we were sleeping. The following day following day we get the news that there is an order by the president to stop importing the fertilizers. So you are left with so-called organic fertilizers, which even that was not available that time, right? And there are a lot of things here, right? And but one thing, the least thing that I want to mention here is that there is no single country in the world which has gone for 100% organic farming. So I mean that itself says everything, right? So we have made.
Was it too soon? Was the government too rush? Did the government rush into this?
You see, now there are certain things that you can do with organic farming. You see that your home garden, you can do it. But when it comes to thousands of acres, imagine that you are going to fill them with these so-called organic fertilizers. Where are you end up with? And thousands of acres of tea plantations. Can you do with organic farming, organic fertilizers? You see that the agriculture was ruined by this very foolish decision. What I think is that people who make the decisions probably made this decision, looking at the foreign currency situation of the foreign reserve situation of the country.
Speaking of foreign reserves, Dr. Weerasinghe, now if you go around Colombo and its suburbs, or even to the villages, one thing is common these days. That's a long line of people. Either they're waiting for kerosene or milk powder, rice, you name it, and especially gas. There's a huge shortage in the market. Where are we heading to, Doctor? Isn't this complete mismanagement?
Yeah, you see that now we need to understand, and we need to look at the things in an objective manner. As I told you, the economic crisis of the country is not a making of 1 or 2 years. It has been happening throughout the years during last 3 to 4 decades, right? But which was aggravated by COVID-19 and the world economic crisis. These two things have aggravated the situation in the country. But please remember, on top of all these things, the very foolish acts or foolish steps or foolish management of things in the government they have aggravated, to the present level of present crisis of the, to the present level, of this situation, right? They have, one by one you can, what those things, what those steps are, everywhere they mismanage, everywhere. Fertilizer issue, one of them, sugar issue, another thing. Then this, everywhere, starting from even this, COVID antigen test kits, everywhere, and then importing nano fertilizer from India. Everywhere there are corruptions and all these things, right? And one side is corruption, on the other side is, some dire, I mean, the results of some of these actions, like fertilizer issue,
which has taken a major toll in
so
the country.
they have, they have done the final nail of the coffin. They have been the final nail of the coffin, right? This is what has happened.
And Doctor, touching on, like you said, the final nail on the coffin, there's one important point that everyone is talking about. That's the controversial LNG power plant. Now, the Communist Party is one of the constituent parties in the government, along with 10 others. Now, these 11 parties have made it clear. They have said no to New Fortress, no to the LNG deal. This is selling natural resources. As a member of the government or a party of the government, where does the Communist Party stand? Because we've seen that the party is coming out and making their say. They had events. They said, "Look, we are against this." Has that position changed, and what's going to happen in the future?
Yeah, you see that we are very clear on this. There is no space to retreat on this matter, right? We have come to a situation where we can't retreat. Right, where we can't retreat. We have taken a position with very clear understanding. You see, I can very briefly tell you, the reasons behind our stance. Number one, you see, government clearly violated. I mean, not government, the people who were rushing
about this deal.
There are certain individuals who are the force behind this this deal, right? They violated, number one, the policy, the energy policy of the country, which was introduced in 2019, but which was adopted or accepted or approved by the cabinet. Where you say the first LNG project should be carried or implemented, right, under the government. It's in black and white, in very clear terms. They have said first LNG the project should be implemented under the government, under the under the CEB, right? So they have said that. Then the second violation, in the act, act and all these the policies, they have said very clearly, all procurements related to electricity and the electricity board should be transparent. Now, where is the transparency when you have called tenders worldwide, and countries bid, and while the evaluation was going on, they were abandoned in a very rude manner, and a company from nowhere was brought into the cabinet.
And I quote Anil Kumar Dissanayake, the leader of the NPP, saying, quote unquote, "It's the midnight deal."
Yeah, then later they signed the deal in the midnight, right? But before that, look at what happened in the cabinet. It was not discussed in the cabinet, right? As it was stated by three ministers of the cabinet, three cabinet ministers, right? They said in the courts, they stated it, right? It was not so. All these things, and look at the economic side. This so-called company is bringing $250 million US, true, and they are buying 40% of Yugadanavi, the power station, powerhouse in Keravalapitia, right? Okay, they are buying, and then they are given the opportunity to build this floating storage, and then the pipeline from floating storage to the Yugadanavi powerhouse, right? All these things are given. And what is the business? The business is around more than 6,000 millions of US in 10 years. 6,000 million. And they are bringing $250 million US. Have you heard of this kind of business, right? And you see, is it economically agreeable? And there are many other things which I don't want to go into, right?
Okay.
But then you see what is at stake. You know, now actually the deal that you were the agreement or whatever the thing that was signed midnight, it allows this company to provide gas for all these LNG power stations that are to be built, that are going to be built in this area, probably totaling to around 1,700 megawatts. Can we imagine what is that? What is the size of that? What is that size? It is around 40 to 45% of the electricity of this country.
So
that kind of
it's a monopoly.
That kind of monopoly you are going to give to a company, right, on a platter, right, on a platter. But you know, go to the history, please. Go to the history. It was with a great struggle. Madam Sirimao Bandaranaike, you know, took over the petroleum, business in this country, which was carried out by 3 companies, namely Shell, Caltex, and Esso. Caltex and Esso are American companies. Shell was a British company, right? They owned the entire business, you know. So Ms. Bandaranaike established Ceylon Petroleum Corporation in 1961 with lot of threats from United States and Great Britain. Actually, we were sanctioned by United States in 1961 using the act which was brought against Cuba by United States, right? There was an act, you know, introduced by United States to punish Cuba, right? To impose economic blockade. That act was used against Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was the second country to victimize through that act, right? So that was the kind of
actually
struggle.
a very interesting conversation that we're having here, but sadly we are running out of time, and the news team is ready with the 9 p.m. news for you. And that's a wrap of Newsline here. And thank you, Dr. Weerasinghe. It was a very fruitful conversation we had. I hope we had more time to discuss this more further, but we are running out of time. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.